Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Dixon, as Bart said. I'm from the Regional Transportation Council, and I just want to echo what Bob, Johanna, and Bart have said. It's exciting to see you all here today. As a project manager for One Region Forward, it's really exciting for me and for our group to see the continued interest in the Citizen Planning School, and again, that you're here on one of the first really nice Saturday mornings that we've had in our region in a long time. So in terms of sustainable transportation and mobility for our region, just want to talk to you this morning about some of the data that we've collected and analyzed at our office at the Regional Transportation Council, as well as part of One Region Forward, to really understand where we've been as a transportation system over the past few decades here in the region, give you some information on some exciting projects that are happening currently, and things that we're looking out big picture-wise to make the system more sustainable in the future, and a system that really works for everybody, provides choice for people to get around other than maybe just one primary mode of automobile, which has sort of been our tradition here in the past in the region. And just to start by way of review, I believe in your first session you received some information on how our area has grown over the past several decades. And the map that you see up on this screen shows what our region looked like in 1950 in sort of that mustard yellowed color. And then in the following 5 decades, between 1950 and 2000, where we grew over that period of time. So if you're thinking from a public transportation system, it was a lot easier for you to operate here across that geography and provide good service to people over having to really extend out into the outer areas. And when having to do so, you maybe can't run routes as frequently and often as you did back in the day when you had a smaller territory to cover. So we really kind of put, in a way, all of our eggs into the automobile basket as we've grown over time in our region. And over that period of time, we really added a lot more infrastructure to the system, more roads and more bridges. And the graph that I have up here for you is related to the Highway Trust Fund. If you're not familiar with the Highway Trust Fund, it's how our transportation system is primarily funded through the federal government. How to pay for roads and bridges, new roads, maintaining all the infrastructure that we have, but also operation-wise, where new bus funding comes from. And if you can see, the blue line represents the funding that's available. The Highway Trust Fund is funded out of a gas tax, so 18 cents on every gallon of gas that's purchased goes into the Highway Trust Fund, and 1 cent out of that 18 goes in towards transit. But that blue line is the funding that's available, and the red line represents the needs that we have for our transportation system. And you can really see as we get to the later years here up to our current year that that gap continues to grow in terms of the needs of our system versus what's available. So they are talking about different funding mechanisms. While it's currently funded with gas tax, it hasn't been raised since 1992. It's stayed at 18 cents since that time. And cars have actually become more efficient since then, which is a good thing. But if your funding source is tied to selling as much gas as you possibly can, then we got to come up with something new. So there's heated debate in Congress right now in terms of how to come up with a new funding source for the Highway Trust Fund, and how we're going to sort of pay for the system that we have and the improvements we want to make going forward to make it more sustainable. Some other challenges in our region. We are an older region, and if you pay attention to the dark green area on the map, this is a map of individuals that are over the age of 65 and where they live in our region. And really those concentrations are where we have over 1,000 older adults per census tract. And so you can see they're really in some of the outer-lying areas that have grown since 1950 significantly are not well served by public transportation. And so in terms of providing choice and options for these individuals, once driving is not really an option for them, it's going to become very challenging for us. And even in areas where there is decent public transportation in our region, we have a bit of a perception problem. I would be one of the creeps and weirdos that rides the bus every day, but there is a perception issue out there that we can't ignore. This is an old ad from Chevy, actually. Chevy Cavalier was my first car, so I'm a little embarrassed that this is the advertisement that they're showing, but you know, there's an alternative. You don't have to take the bus. Here's the car. So there's a perception issue, and I would also argue that transit doesn't necessarily do a very good job in marketing itself overall, but this is one of the few examples where it has and said, you know, hey, being on the Orange Metro line beats being stuck in traffic on Route 101. So what does it take in terms of, you know, we're talking about different types of transportation, different modes, and you know, what does it take to support one type of system over another? You know, how much space and investment is needed for one type of transportation system or another? This is a photo from Australia, but it's based on a famous photo in Munster, Germany, that shows the same street and the same number of people that can fit in one bus, or how much space it would take up if each person had one bicycle versus how much space and infrastructure it takes up if each person is driving by themselves in an automobile. And so if you're a transportation planner or engineer, this road is taking much more of a beating every day versus this road. And you think about the environment that we live in and the winter that we've had, the freeze-thaw effect really does take a beating on pavement in general. So between that and the type of mode or transportation that's going over that pavement on a daily basis, it really impacts on how often we have to repair and maintain our system. So really just something to think about as resources are scarce going forward. But how can we take an existing system and make it work for multiple modes going forward? This is just another example of you know, what takes up space. So one parking space. These are actually very fancy folding bikes, and they can fit about 48 of them in that car, that one space for a car. You know, but you could still fit about 15 to 20 regular-sized bikes if you had the rack set up strategically in one space. So again, just thinking about ways we can utilize a system we have, but make it more user-friendly for different types of transportation going forward. So you're probably thinking these are really nice examples from abroad, but you know, what's really happening here at home? We do know now that the majority of us drive alone to work on a daily basis, and that means that since 1970, far fewer of us are taking public transit, which is not a surprise given the map that I showed in the beginning of the presentation. But in terms of that, on a vehicle miles traveled per day, how much we drive per day. Back in 1970, it was about 8 miles per day, each person in the region. That was the average miles that they covered in their car. It's more than doubled since then. And I just want to take a minute to pause and think about this, because in our region, if we're driving 18 miles a day, and math is not my strong suit, but bear with me, 18 miles a day, and we have 1.1 million people in the two-county region. If you take the average per gallon average for an automobile, miles per gallon, and you know, take into account a sedan, a truck, a van, but you bring those all together, the average miles per gallon is about 23 miles per gallon for a vehicle. 18 miles per day times 7, you got 126 miles a week. Divided by 23 miles a gallon, you get about 5.5 gallons of gas consumed per person per week here in the region. And then you think about the price of gas. So it fluctuates. It's lower than it was a couple years ago. But if we think the gas is around, you know, $2.60 or so, you times that by 5.5 and come up to about a little over $14 a week that's spent on gas per person, if you average it out across 1.1 million people. So 1.1 million people, $14.25, it comes up to a very high sum of money, between $14 and $15 million a week spent on gas in our region, or if you divide it per day, a little over $2 million a day, whoosh, into gas tanks in our region. Because we've constructed our communities as we have, and in many cases the car is needed to get to where you need to go, to get to your job, to get to the grocery store, and every trip you take requires the car. So a lot of people say, you know, there's no money, we can't do it. It just depends on where the money is spent, and so we can't go back. But if we think about the type of transportation system, the sustainable system that we want going forward for our region, do we still want to continue to spend over $2 million a day exclusively on gas? Or can we change the system that we have such that not every trip requires a car, and we can get that statistic to go down? So just something to think about. So for an average family, a little over $1,100, as Johanna mentioned, a great portion of their income already goes to rent. And then if you put transportation, the combined household transportation cost for low-income individuals sucks it right up there. But there is some positive data to share with you. We're seeing more than the amount of people getting to work by bike double in the past decade, and I think that's a reflection of some of the great investments in infrastructure that we've seen, particularly here in the city of Buffalo, and we want to see that continue. And so I've been talking about, you know, the system that we have and where we kind of like to go, some positive things that are happening, and you may say, well, what is a sustainable transportation system? And there really is no single definition, but I just wanted to share with you some examples of what constitutes a sustainable transportation system from the Transportation Research Board. And it's one that allows basic access and development needs of individuals, companies, and society to be met, and in a manner that's consistent with human and ecosystem health and promotes equity within and between successive generations. It's also affordable, it operates fairly and efficiently, and offers choice, and supports a competitive economy as well as balanced regional development. And we also want to take into account using renewable resources where we can at or below rates of generation. So when we think about a sustainable transportation system, how are we going to know if we're being successful? And how can we get to a system that performs the way we want to do and achieves our goals? As part of One Region Forward, I think in your first session you heard about some of the metrics that we've developed. I just wanted to share with you briefly those that specifically relate to transportation and things that we're going to be tracking going forward. You know, are we concentrating development, new development, where we already have infrastructure? We've got a big system to maintain already. We don't want to create more if we don't have to. So focusing development there, focusing job growth on our main streets, our downtowns, and in our former industrial areas, areas where we can serve by different mode choices more effectively rather than building new and out even further. That second statistic there, reducing the vehicle miles traveled, we're at around 18 miles per day per capita. Can we get that number down? More workers getting their jobs by means other than traveling in a single occupancy vehicle. And building new homes and job centers in areas that are connected by public transit. We're going to be tracking these. We want the investments we make in our transportation system to help us move the needle in the right direction. And I think by thinking this way going forward, it's really going to help us get to a more sustainable system that offers more mode choice, for all. So I'm really talking about a multimodal transportation system. That's the geeky planner term that we use, but we're really just talking about a system that works for driving, biking, walking, and taking public transportation together. And I see that this quote is kind of falling off the slide here, but I really like it. It's from a director of public works in Missouri, and you know, an engineer, loves roads and stuff, but is challenged and wants to make a street more complete that works for everybody. So Complete Streets is really you know, one of the places where we're heading, and we've already started to see some great examples here in the region. I want to talk to you about Complete Streets a little bit this morning because I think this is a great opportunity. It's low-hanging fruit in our region. We have some successes, but there's much more opportunity out there. And in many cases, we're not talking about major investments. And again, resources are constrained, but you can do a lot to make a big impact. This is just one example of a 4-lane road. Used to be a 4-lane road, served only cars. Paint, we're just talking paint here. It took a 4-lane road down to 3 lanes, so there's 2 thorough lanes for cars, a center turning lane, and now you've been able to introduce bike lanes on the side, so you're serving 2 modes of transportation instead of 1, just with paint. That's not Linwood. That's actually this is actually from Colorado Springs, but Linwood is a great local example, and didn't get out in time to take a picture now that the weather's nice to show you on Linwood. But again, we've got some great examples here in the city of Buffalo. Yes. That's right. So we do have quite an example of a number of 4-lane roadways that could work like this. They're working on Kenmore Ave. They're starting that now that the weather's broken, and I think that they're looking to expand even further. But that's a great example of a local project and an opportunity. This is from Washington, D.C., but again, you can imagine this type of situation here locally. Major thoroughfare here, very busy street, and then people turning right off onto this side street. And if you're a pedestrian, you're probably here and you're looking over your shoulder and hoping you're not going to get hit. Simple, low cost, low impact, making it very visible that this is the safest place to cross. Pedestrians are here. We're going to improve the curb cuts so it's lower and nobody trips. We're going to introduce pedestrian signaling. So if you're a motorist, you're going to slow down because you realize, you visibly see that pedestrians are likely in this area. And so it's a win-win for everyone. And also from a community standpoint, there's this very dramatic visual and psychological change here that, people care about this. People are paying attention to this area in our neighborhood. And even though complete streets, in many cases, it's paint, sometimes it's more significant than that to make a street that works for pedestrians and safe sidewalks, bike lanes, and to make traffic configurations work safely for everybody. So sometimes money has to come from somewhere. I did want to show you the map of downtown Buffalo. Sometimes the perception is that there isn't enough parking. There's enough parking. There's about over 2 football fields worth of parking if you add it all up. But parking, very expensive. It's only catering to one type of transportation for cars, largely. And if you think about expense-wise, if you're building a parking garage, average per space, if you're building a parking garage, it's about $20,000 to $25,000 per space to build a parking garage. That's above ground. If you want underground parking, the price per space goes up to between $35,000 and $45,000 per space to park your car. So building more parking garages, very expensive endeavor. But even the space that we dedicate to on-street parking, other communities have already instituted what they call parking benefit districts. That discussion is underway in certain parts of our region now too, where revenues from parking in a particular geographic area are now dedicated to making improvements for all users in the system. Parking revenues can be utilized to make this one former car parking space into a place for bicycle parking. You can improve the sidewalk and make other street improvements, so then it's enticing for other people and easier for other people to use a different type or mode of transportation to get to where they need to go. Lastly, I just want to end on some larger scale studies that are underway for potentially major changes in our system. This is available if you Google NFTA transit options. These are 2 studies underway. The first at the top is about the corridor from downtown Buffalo out to Amherst in the University of Buffalo North Campus. And currently our light rail ends here at South Campus. This study is to look at the possible extension of the light rail out to North Campus and what would that look like. What path should it take? Should it be rail, or should it be sort of a dedicated busway? And that study is slated to be completed this December, so stay tuned for results from that. The lower study is just getting underway this time around, although I will say that they've reached into the drawer and are dusting off studies that were done about 30 years ago. around the cobblestone and canal side district. So we read a lot in the paper with the bills and the stadium potentially and all the development that's happening down at that part of the city. We obviously don't want everyone driving to big events, so how could we make changes to the public transportation system and the system overall to make it more multimodal friendly? That study is just getting underway, but you can also read more about it if you go and Google NFTA transit options. There's links to both of those studies. So I really appreciate your time this morning. We really, again, want to make decisions going forward to get the type of performance we want. And so we'll really be paying attention to those metrics so that we can really visibly see a difference in our transportation system to make it more sustainable or not, and what do we need to change going forward. But I appreciate your attention, and I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker. Thank you.